On September 30th, Deadline Hollywood broke the scoop that many have been waiting for. A new high-end series based on Robert E. Howard's stories of Conan is back in development. This time on Netflix. In this video, I will begin by briefly going through the development history behind the series up until this point. What is known about this most recent iteration of it, what we can surmise from that, and finally, go through where this leaves the long-in-gestation King Conan movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Conan series that we now know is in development at Netflix can trace its lineage back to the Conan series that was developed for Amazon a few years back. That started out when Ryan Condal, the showrunner behind Colony and the one Game of Thrones spin-off series still in development, approached Conan rights holder Cabinet Entertainment and pitched his vision for a Conan series to them. This pitch was quite similar to what both Marvel Comics and Dark Horse Comics did when they both nailed it. Which is to say, tell the original Conan stories in the chronological order in which they took place, and flesh out the time frames between the stories with original content. Conan rights holder Cabinet Entertainment loved not just the generalities of the idea, but the specifics of how it would be executed, and took it to Amazon. Amazon loved it too, and gave it a 2-season order. According to those who read it, Ryan Condal's pilot script, based on the Frost Giant's daughter, was the best Conan script ever written, and the series could have been one of the all-time greats. Alas, there was a power shift at Amazon. The guys who greenlit Conan were Me Too'd and ousted, and replaced by Jennifer Salk. As we've covered in earlier videos on that project, she apparently took one look at the project, said to herself, "Oh hell no," and pulled the plug on it due to the, quote, inherent toxic masculinity. And that was the end of that. Condal moved on to that Game of Thrones prequel that I don't think anyone cares about after Benioff and Weiss dropped the ball so badly in season 7 and 8 of the main series. But Cabinet Entertainment and its fearless leader Fredrik Malmberg has been trying to get the ball rolling on another Conan series ever since. Finally, they hit a lucky break. First of all, this series has not been formally announced by Netflix. No, this is an exclusive scoop from Deadline Hollywood, which means it's a leak. Now, that could mean it's a backdoor announcement, or it could mean that someone deliberately put it out there to see what kind of interest there is before committing. Keep that in mind, this is not yet a done deal. Deadline Hollywood writes, "I hear the project from Fredrik Malmberg and Mark Wheeler's Pathfinder Media is the first in a deal between Netflix and Conan Properties International, owned by Malmberg's Cabinet Entertainment. The pact gives Netflix the exclusive option to acquire rights to the Conan literary library and develop works across TV and film, both live action and animated." Okay, cool, I like the sound of that. The Conan library is a rich one, with much awesomeness in it. I'd be all over live-action Conan stories, as well as maybe faithful animated adaptations of the original stories from maybe the same company doing Castlevania and the animated He-Man continuation. This deal, were it to proceed, would allow for that to happen. Not only that, Cull and Solomon Kane could be on the cards later on, as they specify the first in a deal. Deadline Hollywood then writes, "A search is currently underway for a writer/showrunner to pen the Conan adaptation and director to helm the project. Malmberg and Wheeler will serve as executive producers on the potential series through their Pathfinder Media." Okay, so they're still at square one. Doesn't matter what Condal did before, they're starting over. There is one more thing that Deadline Hollywood said which stands out to me. The character was most famously played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 1982 feature Conan the Barbarian, which made him a global superstar, as well as the 1984 sequel Conan the Destroyer. Well, that part is true, and on that note, be sure to check out our ultimate retrospectives for those two movies if you haven't seen them already. But that shameless self-promotion aside, Deadline Hollywood then proceeds to say, in the 2011 Conan the Barbarian reboot, produced by Malmberg, the title role was played by Jason Momoa. That is not wrong per se, as Malmberg was a producer on that movie, but it is misleading to highlight him like that, because he wasn't the producer. That would have been Avi Lerner. He was the main architect behind that movie ending up the disaster it did. Malmberg actually had very little influence over proceedings on that one, and he did what he could to salvage that project as much as possible, which arguably wasn't much. But getting back to this series, we know that it is in development, they are looking for a showrunner, so they haven't gotten very far, and the entire Conan library is available to them. So, what can we expect from this? We can surmise that the series will be a big-budget, high-end series, and that if made, it will probably follow the same basic template that Ryan Condal wanted to do when it was at Amazon, which is to say, adapt the original stories and create new original stories to fill in the gaps in between them. And it will probably end up starring an actor in his late 20s or early to mid-30s, so Conan can age over the course of multiple seasons. What we can only guess is how much it will be toned down. I would not be surprised if there is Witcher-level nudity or some level of gore, but I am much more concerned with how much Conan himself will be toned down. You see, Conan is the ultimate alpha male, and Amazon already pulled the plug on the previous iteration due to toxic masculinity, so that's a concern. In terms of inclusion and diversity, Conan is the perfect series. He travels the world and has frequent encounters with stunning and brave women that sometimes are more than a match for him. If they do it right, a Conan series can be every bit as good as Game of Thrones at its best. They just have to do it right. So someone please lock Benioff and Weiss in a closet or something for the duration of this, even if Netflix has a mega deal with them. But now, I'm sure you wonder, what does this mean for Arnold Schwarzenegger's King Conan movie? Even if made, this series doesn't really mean anything for King Conan, as that movie was dead in the water anyway, and it has been since 2015. Back then, Universal had the rights to make a King Conan movie. They had Arnold, they had a script, they had everything ready to go. But before giving it the green light, they wanted to see how Arnold's comeback as the Terminator in Terminator Sega Genesis would work out. As it turned out, that worked out so poorly that they pulled the plug on the entire King Conan project and gave the rights back to Cabinet Entertainment. Since then, Arnold has wanted to make the movie, but he alone can't do it, because he needs the backing of a studio that will produce and fund it. He would also need the rights, of course, but they would be forthcoming if a studio was there to pick up the bill, and that was always the problem. After the subsequent failure of Terminator Woke Fate, you can rest assured that King Conan movie won't happen, however regrettable that may be. Honestly, the best hope for Arnold's return is actually in a bookend cameo for this series, if it were to take the angle of an older Conan relaying the adventures of his youth. I know I would be all for that approach. If you liked this video and would like to be updated when more information is made available, then please hit subscribe and indicate that you want notifications on all videos so you don't miss out. Then let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.